In today's 10th edition Necron strategy video, we are going to talk about the Deceiver. Are you being deceived? It's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, here we go. Necron strategy 10th edition. I'm going to be talking about the Deceiver today because, let's face it, this is the least used Catan out of the 4 Catans that we've got. Catans are in a really good place at the moment. Now I can totally understand why the Deceiver is the least used. You just have to look at the stats. I've got the stats right here. That's why I'm looking on the table. Even myself making my Catan list with 3 Catans, I didn't choose the Deceiver. The Deceiver was in my list first of all, but I changed my mind. I bottled out. I went for the norm. Nightbringer, Void Dragon, Transcendent Catan. To be honest, you can't go wrong with them because they're all fantastic. However, the Deceiver could be deceiving us because he is actually really good. So today I'm going to have a closer look at the Deceiver and see what strategies we can pull from his stats. I'm hoping to open your eyes a little bit to this Catan because whilst the other Catans are awesome, he also has some useful things about him, and potentially if you're playing a unit which your opponents aren't used to seeing so much, that may just give you the edge. Now, if you have already played the Deceiver, I'd love to know about it. Let me know in the comments box below, and if you're not a subscriber yet, then subscribe now, and don't forget to turn on all notifications by pressing the bell button. Right, let's have a look at Golden Boy. So the Shard of the Deceiver, Golden Boy, because he's golden. You can also call him Pointy Boy or Fist Boy, either way. It'd be interesting to see if we get a new sculpt at some point for the Deceiver. Personally, I love this particular model because it was the first model where I painted something totally different than I would normally paint, which is basically silver. I painted my guy as best I could to the original artwork, and it was the first time that I used inks on my models. Inks, if you don't know what inks are, that's like back in 3rd edition, before we had washes, we had inks. So yeah, I used red ink on the miniature. I'm really happy how it came out, but we're not here to talk about my painting. We're here to look at the strategy for using this mini. So what I'm going to do is start by comparing the stats of the 4 Catans, because effectively we are exactly the same on the stats, with the exception of the OC, which the Deceiver is better than all of the other Catans that we have. OC 6 as opposed to OC 4. And I can tell you from experience, whilst OC 4 is good and workable, OC 6 is a lot better. I mean, that is really, really good. In terms of the abilities, the core abilities, we've got Deadly Demise, as they all have. We have that 5+ Feel No Pain, which they all have. Then we have Stealth. Stealth! That's really good. I guess it took me forever to find Stealth roll in here. Might be in the shooting phase, because that's like where it's used. Yeah. Just wanted to check that. So, -1 to hit for ranged attacks for your opponent. That's really useful. That's going to help this guy out a lot. You don't get that on the Void Dragon, you don't get it on the Nightbringer, and you don't have it on the Transcendent Catan, although admittedly the Transcendent Catan has the other ability of deep striking each turn when it advances, which is pretty awesome. But -1 to hit for our Golden Boy, that's really useful, especially with the Toughness 11, 12 wounds, and a 4+ invulnerable save. Now don't forget, he also has, because I've forgotten this, I'll be honest, he also has a normal 4+ save, so potentially with cover you can get a 3+ save on your Catan. Really nice. Now he has the Necrodemus, which all of the Catans have halving damage, which comes in, which is really useful. but he has his own unique weapons. So his ranged weapon, the Cosmic Insanity, is an anti-character 4+. So that's a critical hit on a 4+ if you're targeting a character. He also has devastating wounds, so those 4+s are going to be devastating. Plus he has precision, so you can actually target a character and make full use of these rules. Now the range is actually pretty decent. It's 18 inches, he has 6 attacks and he hits on 2s. It is strength 6, which is not too bad. It's not amazing, but not too bad. But of course, he does have the anti-character 4+ anyway. And then it's -2 and 1 damage. Not the most amazing damage output for his gun, especially compared to some of the other Catans. But being able to snipe out characters is pretty powerful. Now you may not be able to snipe out some beast units with this particular ability, like say a Hive Tyrant in a Tyrant Bodyguard unit, but you'll be able to snipe out things like Space Marine characters, Orc characters fairly well, especially if you combine this maybe with some death marks, maybe deep striking some death marks, take some pop shots with them, and then of course use the Catan to finish them off. It's a pretty nice ability, and it's something which we don't have much in the army, with the exception of obviously the death marks, because Hexmark Destroyer of course lost the precision ability. Now in melee we've got Golden Fists. Should be just Golden Fist because he's only got 1 fist. In melee we've got 8 attacks, which is pretty decent. Again of course hitting on 2s. And then we are strength 8, which is pretty nice. -3 and a fixed 3 damage. Now 3 damage is actually pretty sound. Okay, it's not as powerful as a D6 plus 2 damage like the Nightbringer, but a flat 3 damage with 8 attacks with that strength 8 is quite nice. His weapons, no doubt, aren't quite as good as some of the others, but they're half decent, and we have the precision ability, which means sniping out characters could be really useful. Things like assassination, or just taking some buffs away from a unit that your opponent has. I'm liking the abilities, even though they're not quite as good as some of the other Catans. However, we've got one more thing to look at. Grand Illusion. Now this is an ability which the model has had since year dot. It has changed over the years, but this is its current form. If your army includes this model, after both players have deployed their armies, select up to 3 Necron units from your army and redeploy them. When doing so, any of those units can be placed into Strategic Reserve, regardless of how many units are already in Strategic Reserve. Now that is probably the best that this ability's ever been. We've always been able to move units. That was the whole point of Grand Illusion. It used to be D3 amount of units, so effectively you could only guarantee that you would be able to move 1 unit, and you could only move it within your deployment zone. This time we've got an automatic 3 units that we can move, and also we can put those units into Strategic Reserve, even if we filled up the amounts of points allocated to that. That's really useful. Not only that, but we've had a rules update in the recent Rules Companion about redeploying. For example, if all the models in one of these units have the Infiltrate ability, that unit's player can set the unit up using that ability. So we can redeploy our Infiltrators units. It doesn't have to be units in the deployment zone. We can take a unit which is infiltrated, like, for example, Flayed Ones, or maybe a unit of Wraiths in the Canoptic Courts with the enhancement which lets you infiltrate. We can take that unit off of the table and we can re-infiltrate them into a different area. That's really good, because not only can we redeploy units in our deployment zone, not only can we put them into Strategic Reserve, but we can also redeploy a unit which is infiltrated. Only 3 units, of course, but really useful. Now in the Hypercrypt Legion, of course, we can do a lot of movement shenanigans, and potentially you don't need this in the Hypocrite Legion. However, it's got other uses, and this is where the real strategy, I think, for the redeployment comes in. I think this particular ability is the most powerful on our big guns, because we know how to deploy our big guns. We deploy them last because we want to find out where our opponent has deployed, and then we put down our big gun units. Well, with this ability, we can redeploy those big guns. Our Locust Heavy Destroyers, our Doomsday Arcs, our Doomstalkers. We can redeploy them so they get line of sight. Now, obviously, you still need to roll off and you need to get first turn to take advantage of this, but I think this is really powerful. Now, of course, yes, you can mess with your opponent's deployment, maybe put some units on the flank, then they might put one of their units over on the flank to sort of counter what you're doing, and then when you redeploy, you take those units and take them off, maybe put them over the other side of the flank. You know, there's lots of options, but of course your opponent knows, well, your opponent should know, or at least you're probably going to tell them that you can redeploy units, so they may be expecting that. However, in the heat of battle, they may forget. In the heat of battle, they may not consider that, but I think more importantly is being able to redeploy those big guns so that if you get a first turn, you've got good line of sight to be able to pop tanks and do some damage. Now, if you're still watching at this point of the video, I'd really appreciate it, and I'd love some feedback from you guys, because this video hasn't been scripted. This video I've just done off the top of my head, and I'd love to know what you think of it, how it came out, if you prefer more scripted video, or if you preferred this style of video. Let me know in the comments box below. And if you want to see some of my other Necron videos, then here's some which YouTube thinks you would enjoy watching next.